You ever get one of those letters that makes your whole body go hot before you even finish reading it? Yeah. Mine said I owed the HOA $1,000 for unauthorized lake use, and I was standing there on my own back deck, looking at my own water, trying to figure out how in the hell a woman named Karen had managed to find me for existing on my own property. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about rules anymore, this was personal. My name's Daniel Harper. I'm 42 and I've lived in Willow Creek Estates for almost 15 years. Back when my wife and I bought this place, it felt like winning something I didn't even know I'd been chasing. The house wasn't flashy, not by neighborhood standards, but it had soul old wooden floors that creaked in the right places, big back windows that caught the morning light, and behind it all, sloping down past the grass and the willow roots, the lake. That lake was the reason we bought the place, plain and simple. In the mornings, especially in early fall, fog would lift off the water so slowly it looked like the lake was breathing. The pine smell would drift uphill, the birds would start up before the sun had fully committed to the day, and I'd take the rowboat out while the rest of the world still felt half asleep. Sometimes I fished, sometimes I just floated. Sometimes I just needed 5 quiet minutes where nobody wanted anything from me. My kids grew up splashing in that water. My wife planted lavender and hydrangeas along the bank. I built a floating platform years ago, nothing crazy, just a little place for the kids to jump from in summer and for me to sit with my feet in the water when the heat got mean. That stretch of shoreline wasn't just scenery, it was memory, stress, relief, family history in real time. Now Willow Creek looks beautiful from the outside, almost suspiciously beautiful. Curved streets, trimmed hedges, brick sidewalks, the kind of place where every mailbox seems approved by some committee of joyless perfectionists. And of course, there was an HOA, thick handbook, endless rules, the usual suburban religion, fence height, flower beds, paint shades, mailbox, design, holiday decorations, all of it. I never loved it, but I could live with it. Most of us did. Then Karen Mitchell moved in. I met her the first week she arrived, one of those chilly autumn mornings where the leaves smell dry and the air bites a little. She was out front pruning rose bushes in white gloves like she was auditioning to be president of a country club. She smiled, introduced herself, complimented the lake view, and in the same breath asked whether my dock had been properly reviewed. That should have told me everything. Karen had that polished, expensive kind of friendliness that somehow made you feel inspected. She tilted her head when she listened, nodded like she was being gracious, but every conversation with her felt like she was taking inventory. The boat, the dock, the garden beds, the shoreline, the platform. She always noticed, always asked, always framed it like harmless curiosity. "Oh, that's such a lovely rowboat," she said to me once, smiling with her mouth and not her eyes. "I do hope it meets community guidelines." That was Karen in a sentence. After a while, she became impossible to ignore. She'd cruise past my driveway with her window down and a clipboard in her lap. She'd walk the street early in the morning, slow as a patrol officer studying hedges and roof lines. Notes started showing up printed, not handwritten because apparently even passive aggression needed formatting in Willow Creek. "Please ensure your garden remains in compliance. Please review dock-related regulations. Please be mindful of shared aesthetic standards." Shared aesthetic standards? For my backyard lake. At first I laughed it off. Then I saw her taking pictures. Not casually either. I mean, crouched angles, peeking through shrubs, zooming in on my dock and the platform like she was building a criminal case against a man guilty of enjoying his own property too enthusiastically. One afternoon I caught her across the street pretending to adjust her sunglasses while her phone camera stayed pointed right at my rowboat. And then the letter came. Formal HOA notice, official seal, unauthorized swimming area, unauthorized water platform, $1,000 fine. I read it twice, then a third time, because sometimes your brain refuses to accept stupidity at full speed. My hands were shaking, and not in that theatrical movie way, either real anger, the kind that starts low in your stomach and climbs. I looked out at the lake, the water catching that late afternoon light, soft gold on the ripples, and for the first time in 15 years, that place didn't feel peaceful. It felt watched. It felt occupied. And right then, with that letter in my hand and Karen probably somewhere nearby polishing her sense of authority, I made up my mind I was not going to let some clipboard tyrant turn my backyard into a crime scene. The next morning I didn't rant, I didn't storm over, and I didn't give Karen the satisfaction of a driveway showdown. I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee, the sunlight coming through the blinds in sharp stripes, and I started doing something far more dangerous than yelling. I started checking facts. First stop was the municipal records office, the kind of place that smells like dust toner and old paper. I asked for deed maps, zoning records, property line documents, lake access restrictions, everything. And after about an hour of flipping through old plats and city records, the clerk looked up at me and said the words I'd been hoping for. "Sir, the portion of that lake within your property line is privately owned. The HOA doesn't control usage there." I almost laughed right there at the counter. No city ordinance against swimming. No prohibition on a small private platform. No HOA jurisdiction over my part of the water. Karen hadn't just been annoying, she had been dead wrong. Then I called an attorney. Her office had leather chairs, shelves full of law books, and the calm energy of somebody who'd seen every flavor of neighborhood nonsense this world can produce. I gave her the fine notice, the property documents, the photos I already had, and she read through it all with that tight little expression lawyers get when someone has been both arrogant and sloppy. "This is overreach," she said. "Blatant overreach. Fight it." So I did. I built a file so thick it could have stunned a burglar. Deed zoning maps, dated photos of the dock and platform going back years, records showing long-term lake use, screenshots of municipal code copies of Karen's notes, timestamps, drive-by photos, everything. And once I started paying attention, I realized I wasn't the only one. That was the twist I never saw coming. My next-door neighbor on the other side, Mrs. Alvarez, quiet woman, retired. School principal, always kind, always baking something with cinnamon, and it stopped me while I was bringing in groceries. She looked at the stack of folders in my arms and said, "You finally taking her on?" I said, "You too." She gave me this tired little laugh and told me Karen had hit her with 3 separate warnings over potted plants. Not dead plants, not broken pots, just the number of pots on her front steps. Then another neighbor admitted Karen had been photographing his truck. Another had gotten threatening notices over a bird bath. One by one, people started talking. Turns out Karen's power only worked because everybody thought they were fighting her alone. By the time the HOA board meeting rolled around, I wasn't just showing up as the guy with a lake dispute. I was showing up with a paper trail, legal backing, and a neighborhood full of people finally ready to stop whispering and start speaking. The meeting room smelled like stale coffee and furniture polish. Folding chairs, fluorescent lighting, that weird civic tension in the air where everybody acts polite, but you can feel the temperature underneath it. Karen sat at the front in a navy blazer, clipboard in hand, posture straight, expression composed, but I could already see it. That tiny crack around the eyes when someone senses the script is about to stop going their way. I laid my folder on the table and said, calm as I could manage, "I'd like an explanation for why I was fined $1,000 for using my own privately owned lake frontage." Karen smiled that sugar glass smile of hers. "Rules are rules, Daniel." "No," I said, opening the file. "Rules are rules when they actually apply." I spread the documents out in front of the board, maps, deeds, municipal confirmation, photos, dates, codes. I walked them through it piece by piece. My water, my shoreline, no jurisdiction, no legal basis, no authority. The room got real quiet. Karen tried to recover, said something about community standards and maintaining order, but it sounded weak now, like a bad engine turning over. Then Mrs. Alvarez stood up. That woman had the calm voice of somebody who'd spent 30 years silencing classrooms with one sentence. "I'd like the board to review my violations as well," she said. Then another neighbor spoke. Then another. And suddenly Karen wasn't the enforcer anymore. She was the subject. I'll tell you something I learned that night. Bullies age 10 years and 10 seconds when the room stops being afraid of them. I had one more card to play, and I played it slowly. I told the board my attorney was prepared to pursue formal action for harassment, selective enforcement, and abuse of authority. I requested immediate dismissal of the fine, a written correction in the HOA record, and a review of Karen's conduct as HOA president. Not emotional, not dramatic, just clean, documented, undeniable. Karen finally snapped. "This is absurd," she said, voice tightening. "You people are turning this into a spectacle." "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You did that when you mistook control for leadership." And that right there was the first time she looked scared. The board overturned my fine that same week. Gone. Erased. No apology from Karen. Of course, people like that treat accountability like an allergy, but the bigger thing didn't happen until after. The board launched an internal review. That phrase sounds boring, I know. But let me tell you, when a person has built their whole identity around policing everybody else, an internal review hits like lightning. Karen started firing off emails, cornering neighbors, trying to explain, trying to justify, trying to spin herself into some misunderstood guardian of the neighborhood. It only made things worse, because now people were watching her the way she'd watched all of us. A temporary acting president was appointed while the board reviewed complaints. More homeowners came forward, more letters surfaced, more photos, more weird little incidents everybody had brushed off for months or years because nobody wanted the headache. Put together, though, it painted a picture clear as day. Karen hadn't been protecting the neighborhood. She'd been feeding on control. A couple weeks later, I got the notice. Karen Mitchell had been removed from decision-making authority pending final board action. Enforcement policies were being rewritten. All discretionary fines issued under her review were being audited. Harassment complaints would be formally logged going forward. I read that letter standing by the kitchen counter, and I'm not ashamed to tell you I smiled so hard my face hurt. But the best part, the truly beautiful part, came the next afternoon. I was out back when the mail carrier walked up Karen's pristine front path and slipped a certified envelope into her box. The wind was tossing red leaves across her driveway, that spotless driveway she used to treat like a military parade ground. A few minutes later, she came out, opened the envelope, and I watched her face change. No clipboard, no queenly posture, no smug little smile. Just a woman standing in her own perfect yard, realizing the machinery she loved so much had finally turned and looked at her. She saw me then. I was down by the dock, one hand on the rowboat, not grinning, not waving, just standing there. And for the first time since she'd moved in, Karen looked away first. That evening, I untied the boat and pushed off into the lake. The sun was dropping low, throwing gold across the water. The willows along the bank moved in the breeze with that soft, whispering sound, and the hull made that familiar little knocking rhythm against the ripples. Everything smelled like wet earth pine and cooling air. My shoulders, which had been tight for months without me even realizing it, finally let go. Out there in the middle of the water, I had this thought that hit me harder than the fight itself. Rules aren't the problem. Power without humility is the problem. That's the thing nobody tells you about people like Karen. They rarely start out thinking they're the villain. They tell themselves they're protecting standards, preserving order, doing what others are too weak or too lazy to do. And somewhere along the way, they stop seeing neighbors as human beings and start seeing them as obstacles, case numbers, warnings, examples. And if you're not careful, that kind of person can make you forget something important. Your peace has value, and protecting it is not the same thing as being difficult. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because I got patient, got smart, and refused to hand over my rights just to keep the peace with someone who had no intention of giving me any. By the time the stars started showing up in the water, scattered and trembling like broken glass, the whole place felt like mine again. Not because a board said so, not because Karen lost, but because I had stood in the middle of a slow, petty abuse of power and said enough. And that changes a man. Karen still lives in Willow Creek, by the way. She keeps to herself now. No clipboard, no inspections, no slow drive-bys with the windows down. People still talk of course neighborhoods run on gossip, the way old trucks run on oil, but the fear is gone. The spell broke. And every now and then when I'm rowing out across that lake in the early morning fog, I think about how close I came to doing what a lot of people do. Paying the fine, staying quiet, telling myself it wasn't worth the trouble. That's the real trap, isn't it? Not the bully. The silence around them. So let me ask you this, when somebody hides behind rules to control what isn't theirs, where's the line between order and abuse? And when karma finally comes around, is that justice or just payback? Wearing a nicer suit. Tell me what you think. Were Karen's consequences fair, or should she have faced even more? And have you ever had a neighbor, an HOA, or some petty little tyrant try to push you around on your own property? Share your story. I guarantee more people have lived this nightmare than anybody wants to admit.